I know we talked about, this is actually really good for this conversation, actually. I think it was episode 2, we talked about the outlaw portion of the name of this show and its significance to both of us. Would you like to talk about the evidence of the unseen portion of our of our name today and that significance?
Well, it is interesting given what we're going to be talking about in the episode today. Well, evidence of the unseen was the scripture. Ultimately, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We really drew it for the title from the James Baldwin appropriated that scripture for a book, and we like that too. But I actually think about that a lot as we've been talking about over the course of the show, kind of the irrationality of how faith is discussed, explained, utilized. And I was actually thinking, as we were getting ready, about that awful Donald Lawrence song, I'm not making sense, I'm making faith. And just, how can you not be insane when that's how you're moving through the world? And so what do I believe for? And the evidence of the unseen is really about survival. It's not about imagining, that Harry Potter world we've talked about over and over, that the kingdom and, that shit. Mm-hmm. It's about how can I survive this, particularly as we're now, where we are in the world with the pandemic and Ukraine and just Russia and all this foolishness that we have no control over. Mm-hmm. The evidence of the unseen is really me just saying, I'm putting all of my energy into surviving this the best I can.
Yeah.
With what I have at my disposal. But I am not going to set myself up to be disappointed, waiting for chariots and trumpets and something to happen that is not going to happen because it hasn't happened in thousands of years. So
it never happened.
It never. And so faith really for me is about just survival.
Yeah.
Believing that I can survive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess for me, it's about figuring out what is in our power to do, which I feel like every day that is a very different answer, depending on my mood, depending on how bad my anxiety is, depending on how discouraged I feel about what I see in the news or on social media or whatever, depending on how close I feel to other people, because I also feel like power to do things or to create or to quote unquote manifest things is a lot of that is contingent on community and what we can do together, how we can share power and resources to make change, whatever that means. And so that is such a seeker answer because that's still where I am, unfortunately. Sometimes I feel like optimistic about carving out some segment of the universe and making it something beautiful, and then other times I'm just like, well, I can go down to the kitchen and make myself a drink.
Well, I feel like ultimately, I mean, you have a song, that's coming out in a few weeks called Make It With Me, and I think ultimately that's what that song is about. It is about faith that we can build something, not faith that there's something already prepared for us somewhere else. It is about what we believe we can do together.
Yeah.
And that's to me the evidence of the unseen. But we have to do it. It's not the magic wand waving.
Yeah.
Decreeing and declaring and announcing announcements.
I renegade through and through. I renegade through and through. Oh, Lord, if you only knew. Now tell me, what do I do? And if what I say is true, how could I get through to you? I don't know how to behave. I don't know how to behave. And if I don't change my ways, it might send me to my grave. But if what I say is
Welcome to Outlaws Evidence of the Unseen, exceptional stories and conversations that weave history, religion, arts, and politics into the fabric of our greater cultural narrative. I am Ray Curenton, singer, songwriter, and producer.
Tim Dillinger, historian, storyteller, singer, songwriter.
If you like the show, be sure to subscribe and tell everyone that you know to tune in as well. And if you feel so inclined, please rate and review the show wherever you listen. This helps more people find us. And today, I had written down, or we had initially just kind of created a placeholder title or topic for the show as anti-science rhetoric in the church. But I feel like we're kind of talking about how anti-science rhetoric informs a lot of other things.
The world.
It's not just like, these are all the ways that the church is anti-science. It's like, these are all of the anti-science things that the church does.
And normalizes.
And all of the ways that thinking around just how the world works, or how faith could work, as we talked about in the intro, like how all of it is either antiquated or reductionist or
disoriented,
harmful to people, and creates difficulties not just for the lay members but also for society. So I guess, as we always do when we start these conversations, at what point, as a child or as a Christian walking the faith, at what point did you realize that there was an anti-science thread in the church? Like, were you always aware of that? You said before we even started the call, or started the show, that you weren't a science kid.
No.
So did you even care?
No, it was all explained to me, really, because I was an early reader. And so I had a picture Bible. And so the picture Bible had, of course, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So I saw it actually drawn out. So from the very beginning for me, it was about this magical thing happening. Mm-hmm. And of course, we were a Christian television home. Mm-hmm. And so faith healers were immediately normalized for me. Mm-hmm. That you didn't need doctors, that you could, have somebody pray for you, mm-hmm. and believe, and your malady would be cured.
Yeah.
Would just go away. And then of course I went to a Christian school, mm-hmm. Southern Baptist, kindergarten, elementary school, where they used the Becca books, which we know are horrific. And so I don't even remember having a science class until, and I could be very wrong. I mean, I could have blocked out.
Yeah, just repressing.
But I don't even remember having a science class until I transferred to a Moody Bible Institute elementary school in the 5th grade. And that was the first time I remember having a science class where they were teaching us creationism as science. That's the first time I remember that. And it was the thing that, and so no, I didn't recognize it was crazy because it was all I knew.
Yeah.
But I knew that there was a disconnect for me, because when we transitioned from the magic of creation into some like molecules and cells, and none of it made any sense to me at all. I mean, I struggled to pass science classes because it was just all like, what is this? It did not connect. So that was my early science indoctrination. And I remember when we had to dissect animals, 7th grade, we were dissecting like frogs and stuff. And I just struggled. And so all through high school, I just took like bare minimum science courses, like whatever I had to have to get through. And I usually got through them with like C's because it was really hard for me. So I as a 46-year-old adult, I fully recognized that for me, I couldn't make the leap to actual scientific language and knowledge because none of it made any sense to me from how even the earth being made was explained. Mm-hmm. We were told evolution was wrong. It was New Age. It was demonic. It was Darwinism. We had to learn those kinds of words in science class.
Right.
And so their way of explaining evolution to us was just to tell us that it was a false theory taught by Darwin. And that was the end of it. And so it wasn't until I really got out of high school, got out of the Christian bubble in my 20s, that I started to understand, put all these things together. So it stunted me. It really stunted me in many ways.
I didn't have that experience. I did get, there was such, I mean, I just feel like it's always the topic of conversation when they're not busy, like, trying to deny gay people their rights or trans people their rights or whatever the current thing is. And now it's, just pandemic nonsense. But there's always the evolution in schools. In schools, it's so bad. They want to teach your kids that we came from monkeys and blah, 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 blah. And so I remember that being such a controversy through my childhood, but I feel like I got most of that through television, like either Christian television or just seeing that being prevalent in the news. I also remember stem cell research being such a controversial thing as a kid. But other than that, of course we had the whole faith healers, confession stuff around, miraculous, physical healings and all of that stuff, just, in the church. But I also had parents that, at least communicated to me that doctors were helpers. They even said, like, doctors are here on this earth, to help, to be, tools of God to help heal people. And so I didn't have such a conflict between, if a doctor says one thing, but I believe another, then I don't believe the doctor. Like, I never had that kind of thing. But then I saw other people say that, in other, either in church spaces or whatever. And so that kind of cued me in on, well, maybe in our home as Christians, we don't hold those beliefs, but there are other Christians who do. And that's normal in some of these spaces. So what is that? But yeah, I definitely did believe in the creation all through my childhood. And I think I said in the first episode, like, the thing that really cracked open just deconstructing faith and tearing down all of these doctrines, I guess, for me, was evolution. I remember being in, I want to say either my sophomore or junior year of high school, and I was in a biology course, Biology 2, and we were, in the subject of evolution. We never really talked about human evolution in that course. But we did get a take-home assignment, and we had like a worksheet or something we were supposed to fill out. And there were, the part of the assignment were instructions to go onto a PBS website and watch some snippets, some clips, segments of some PBS documentary or series or something on evolution, and go through and answer watch the video, answer the questions based on what was talked about in the thing. And so I went through, and then towards the end, there was a piece about human evolution in particular. And I feel like it was the only time it was even touched on. Of course we talked about common ancestors, but it was mostly animals. It was there was not a lot of talk about there being some primate common ancestor that humans evolved from. That was never harped on in school. I think because it was so, they just didn't want to press it too hard. And I think there were ways to just talk about the theories of evolution and make those legitimate without, just beating that dead. And I think they knew, there are kids in this school now that it's just been taught to them from from childhood that they're going to resist that and have a reaction and take that to their parents and create a big stink, probably. So that's probably why it wasn't harped on. But yeah, in the video, the last video, or one of the last videos on the assignment, it was a clip, and I've been trying to find it and I can't find it, but it was scientists, Christians who are scientists, who believe in evolution. And I remember watching that clip. It was maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And just seeing these intelligent people talk about both their faith and their belief in scientific theory and evolution, and just kind of saying, there's no conflict. Like, I can hold this belief in that belief, and it's reconciled for me. I can be informed about both, and actually my faith informs my career, and being a biologist or whatever scientist they were, like, is not in conflict with my faith and my belief in, and of course, I don't want to like dig too deeply into like interpretations of Genesis and how that might make sense. I do remember my mom at one point saying something like, well, kind of using like that scripture, one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and kind of going, there could be ways to interpret, that to kind of be a little bit more loose. And, I feel like that was probably alluded to in that video, a lot of the ways that, there's so much mystery and there's so much open interpretation and symbolism in those scriptures that you could, if you chose to, need the scripture in your life, interpret it that way and be reconciled. And that just totally like cracked open so many things for me moving forward in dissecting all kinds of things around faith and the things that are potentially in conflict with it.
As you were talking, I remember now science teachers in my childhood really scoffing at the idea that the earth was millions of years old. And so that was like an immediate, and I never understood why they were so, adamant about that. But I think in retrospect, it's because it delegitimizes in their minds a literal timeline in the Bible.
Yes, absolutely. It absolutely does. If it was 7 days, and then if we're like tracking back to when we think Abraham was on the planet, then the earth is only 6,000 or 10,000 years old. And so how could it possibly be millions? Yeah. And so that was always something in science class that was kind of hard for me to reconcile. Like, if they're talking about millions of years old, but I'm being told that, in church or whatever, that the earth isn't that old. Well, human history isn't that old. Yeah.
Well, and I have to say too, the other piece for me in childhood was that my family was already, and we're talking like the 80s, anti-vax. Already anti-vax. So I remember getting ready to go to middle school and they had a doctor, however he did this, but he wrote a letter saying that I was exempt from vaccinations for religious reasons. That was in 7th. I guess you had to have middle school shots back then.
Yeah, probably MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, maybe.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the vaccines I had to get at that age, maybe.
And I didn't understand what that was about, because it was just and I didn't connect it to faith. Now, knowing what I know and seeing these people being so insane today, I realized there was clearly some discourse happening in evangelicalism even then about vaccinations.
And I'm sorry, how the fuck was your grandmother anti-vax, and she was living with polio?
She was living with polio and stayed in. Well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, because I wanted, that's the other dichotomy we had happening, because they also believed in divine healing, and my grandmother was in a wheelchair and had been by the time I came along for 50 years.
So the answer isn't other people shouldn't get polio, so they should get the polio vaccine. The answer is I should be healed and be able to get out of the wheelchair.
Well, no, because that's the other piece we can't go all down that, because my grandmother was a very special case. Because no, she did not want people praying for her to be healed. She did not want faith healers that came to our church. She would hide in the church office when they came, because she knew she was a target for display.
Yeah.
And my grandmother was crazy, but she wasn't completely crazy.
Yeah.
And so she would hide in the back so that they would not pray for her or bring her up. It was really traumatic for her. Like, she would, and I don't know if it happened prior to me being born, and she just was like, never again. But she did not desire healing. She did not talk that way. She accepted, but she was very much into faith healers. They would bring them to the church. We watched them on TV. She professed divine healing for others, but not for herself.
So complex.
All right. So I didn't mean to go off on
No. And I feel like you had shared that with me, that she was not seeking some kind of
no, it was a real thing.
divine
She would
intervention,
shake. I remember her shaking when the faith healers would come to the church because it terrified her that they were going to.
And that's so fucked up. And of course it did. Of course it did, because it's stigma. It's
you don't believe.
Yeah, it's spectacle, and it's which we're gonna get into. And so I guess just for a little bit of context, I was trying to kind of think about, like, at what point did this fissure kind of form where it's like, no, religion's going to be over here and science is going to be over here, and they never the two shall meet. And I guess, a lot of signs point to the whole Galileo thing. Galileo discovering that no, actually the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. It's actually the opposite. We revolve around the sun, and there being so much backlash to that at the time. And then, of course, the backlash to evolution as well, those two things. And it's so funny because as a kid, I thought the whole concept of heliocentrism, the idea of us revolving around the sun, was kind of settled. Like, we as a society were clear, like, we're good on that. And then this whole, like, flat earth thing, I guess, was never gone, but just because of the internet and social media, just, like, rose up from the ashes or something. And that was just so weird to see become, like, such a huge thing. I feel like it, like, really became a really big thing again when I was in college. And just, like, people talking about it, and people like B.O.B., the rapper, like, saying he was a flat earther. And I'm just like, what is that? And so, up until that point, that wasn't really a point of contention for me. But, of course, it was the whole rejection of evolution and, this young earth creationism, which I didn't realize there were, like, creationists who are young earth creationists, which believe what you talked about, like the earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old, versus old earth creationists who are like, no, you can actually interpret the scripture in such a way that you can believe the earth is millions of years old and it, is compatible. So, I guess those are kind of the first big things that kind of created those rifts between the two. But I guess I just kind of want to dig into a lot of the other ways, like on a micro level, the individual community level, that just opposition to science or resistance to seeing the world in such a material way, natural way, how that affects people in the church, affected us growing up in the church. And I feel like a huge piece of that is the notion of the supernatural, the notion of divine intervention and miracles.
Well, yes. I mean, I think, and part of the problem isn't necessarily the idea of the supernatural. It is the idea that the supernatural is the only thing that can happen to remedy a situation. And so people read the Bible in a very problematic, the Bible already in it by itself is kind of problematic, but it is enhanced by how people read with no nuance and no ability to have multiple options. So because Jesus healed the sick, then everybody should just be healed through divine means. Even though the Bible does also talk about the sick needing a physician.
Right.
And so the Bible, in a sense, you could argue, does make room for both things to coexist. And I'm not a big Bible defender, so don't hear me that way. But I am saying both things.
If you need to have that in your life, you can also...
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we also, though, in thinking about illness, don't differentiate between things that are, and I want to say this word right because I always say it wrong, psychosomatic, and things that are actually ailing us. I mean, I had an experience where I was having a physical manifestation of something that was going on for me that was emotional. It was manifesting physically. And I had an experience in an Andre Crouch service where something happened for me and it clicked, and I was never I never suffered from that again. And did I leave that meeting and say, oh my goodness, I was healed? No, I did not, because part of what happened for me in that experience was I understood something had manifested in my body because of something that was happening for me emotionally. And I went about resolving that emotional situation when I left, and it relieved the physical symptoms.
Yeah.
or problem that I was having. I have also, though, had to be reliant on doctors through the years for things that were genuinely,
Ailing you.
physically ailing me. And there was no divine answer. That was just, it wasn't even what I was seeking out. And so because people approach their spirituality in a very fundamentalist way, they don't have room for all of those possibilities. And so you get things like the idea of a miracle. Why would we need to prefer a miracle when we can just go to the doctor and take a pill?
Right.
To help us recover.
It's like the idea of preventative medicine is just so like counter to how faith works for them.
My grandmother never went to a doctor.
Oh my God.
In the entire time I when she was alive, and I knew her, she never went to a doctor. Never went. My grandfather, kicking and screaming, but that was not the go-to for my family. And so that took a lot of reprogramming for me as an adult I need to have a physical every year. I mean, I was probably in my late 20s before I really recognized I needed to do that.
Yeah.
Because even in, leaving white evangelicalism, moving into the Black Holiness Church, I pretty much experienced the same relationship with doctors. And so, you just pray, we gonna pray. And then if things flare up bad enough, we'll go to the ER. But, consistent physical upkeep was not always feasible.
Yeah.
Monetarily, but it also was just not the go-to, period. It was not the first approach. And so there was a lot of reliance on faith healers.
So
not in my life, but in the world.
Yeah, and in the world that you grew up in,
yes.
The world that you witnessed and that informed your reality up to a point. So I was not aware at all before we decided to have this discussion of the happy hunters. You told me about them. Tell us about your experience with the happy hunters and who they are for the people.
Charles and Francis Hunter were evangelical personalities. They became known as faith healers, and they would teach healing to around the world. They went to churches around the world, and they would hold these huge seminars and workshops and teach people to heal. And then they would have a miracle crusade at the end of their training period. Don't quote me. I think it was like an 8-week course or something. And so you could take it. They had a satellite course. They had a video course. So churches would buy the videos, or if they had a satellite dish, they just tune in. Sure, people would come every week and watch it. And then at the end of that course, you get a little certificate, and they would have a massive rally in each city where you would be set loose to just pray for people in a huge line. And so a lot of it was about this whole belief that the common thing they wanted you to really focus on was back problems. Okay. And so if you sat people in chairs and had them hold out their legs, you could see, one leg is shorter than the other, and you pray, and that leg just magically grows out to align with the other one.
Yes, which we watched one of those videos. Well, before we really get into the mechanics of the healings that they were doing, finger quotes, I'm guessing that a lot of this, and I've been in Christian spaces where this has been the framework for that mentality as well. Like the miracles didn't just stop in the Bible days.
That's right.
That's right. The things that were happening in Acts, we have the power to do that too. Like, was that the framework for what they? Yeah.
Well, and I realized also now that I think it's also connected to the nationalism that was really happening in the 80s and building that we see really full-blown crazy today. It was a part of that. It was this idea that we are supernatural beings doing what Jesus did on earth. And that will change the world. And we will take over the world because we have these powers.
Never mind that there are so many more Christians on earth now than there were then. So is the power just
I didn't say it was rational.
No, I'm just trying to understand. Like, is it that as it spreads out, as more people are converted to the faith, the power becomes a little lessened? Or we just
No.
haven't tapped into it, even though there are so many more of it. Just seems so illogical.
Well, it's about this whole, though, this tier of belief. You know, this tier, and that if you want to be really the world changer, then you're going to want this power, you know, and you're going to seek God and take our course and pay us our money and learn how to do what we've done. And we have the videos here to show you. We've done it all over the world.
So there are like believers that just believe in Jesus.
And then
there's like the super believers.
That's right.
Who are then like
the doers.
able to do stuff.
And we can all do it. Not everybody wants to, not everybody chooses to, but it is available to all of us.
Also, why does it need to be taught? If they were just kind of doing it in Acts, why do we need whole courses? Were you paying for this? Were they being paid to do these
I believe.
courses?
Well, you're buying the videos. You're
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have to pay for the certificate?
No, I think that came with, because I feel like people in the church had to register, and I could be very wrong. I could be remembering all of this wrong, but I believe people had to register, and there was some sort of fee, because then, of course, people were paying a fee to help the church cover the cost of, you know, the videos.
Okay. So the theater. So the actual healing. So yeah, so you learned how to do this.
We learned how to do this,
Uh-huh.
and there was a specific, like, in the name of Jesus, we command, you know, these limbs to, you know, to be aligned, and, you know, some rhetoric like that. And you watching the hands, you know, line up, the feet line up, and you just, you know, slap them on the head, you're healed, and they go on about their business. And if there were other things, you just prayed for them the same kind of prayer, but about what their ailment was. And, you know, the people with, I don't want to sound, you know, coarse or dismissive, but like the people with cancer, it's just like, you're healed.
Right.
You know,
yeah, you're
and-
not going to see the
I mean,
cells
yeah.
like
Yeah.
regroup or reconstitute or whatever.
just to believe it, and, you know.
Yeah. All right. You got it.
And so those kinds of things are really, in a sense, monetizable, because you've got, yes, you have the person with cancer or with some other condition, but the majority of these people had back problems, limb problems. You're able to show, you know, and it's just what happens when you sit in a chair. It's just, there's nothing special about it.
Yeah.
And of course, I was in 5th grade.
Yeah. So did you, like, as you were going through it, did you believe, like, I'm really, like, doing it? I'm learning how to heal
I was
people?
terrified because I didn't like doing that kind of thing. I didn't like, which I think we've always talked about, like, I've had challenges with the whole concept of prayer. And so I was just going through the motions of what I had to do as the preacher's kid.
And they just told you, like, you have to go through this. Okay.
Yeah, it was not like, ooh,
Yeah,
I want
sign
to
me
go.
up.
I want to go sit in the course with the happy hunters. I'm in 10 years old, and
Yeah,
that sounds like fun. No, and it was just something I had to perform through and do. And you don't realize how all of these little things that you don't know what you're doing or don't want to do, you're just performing through, how they still inform what you know in the world or don't know in the world. And so I wasn't connecting it to science then. I do now. Your own physical health, how you connect that to your own physical health, how that affects how you view what's happening in your body. I was 10 years old, you know, but then after the Happy Hunters, we really saw, and there were like little people at that time, like W.V. Grant, who was on TV. And of course, Catherine Kuhlman is really the big, she's the big name in the 70s that really brought faith healing really front and center.
I love that I forgot about her.
And she was really you know, one of the, in terms of being seen on television, she was one of the originals. And, you know, you get through the 80s, and then at the end of the 80s, Benny Hinn really erupted. He really erupted. And that was pure theater.
Yeah, and that's what I remember, like, growing up watching. He came on, I want to say, like, at 6:30 in the morning.
It was early, yes.
Yeah, syndicated, probably on TBN or whatever, and it would just be on. I don't know if my mom had it on or if it was just kind of like one of the only things that was on, so it would just be on TV. And I would, like, every day, the formula, I would, like, take that in the mornings and see that show, that Broadway play.
Now he was for me, that was really the beginning of my, like, I'm not buying any of this. Like, this is really not real. And I saw it as money, and I saw it as, you know, something that people were really suckering people into participating in and buying into. I did not ever see Benny, and my mother went to one of the big services, I was able to, no, I'm not interested in that. And, make a decision to not go. But yeah, it was a thing.
And it was smart because he was doing the crusades is what he
Yes.
called them. And so, yeah, he would always be on tour and have the advertisements in between the different services and things. And yeah, this the big whooshing
Yeah.
and the flags or sheets or whatever he would wave at people and smacking them and throwing them down. I mean, it was very
Wrestling.
violent.
It's like WWF for,
For
Jesus.
Jesus.
Yeah. And yeah, it was spectacle. And
Yeah.
I just...
And entirely too big. Entirely. I mean, these stadiums he was filling, and I mean, I guess it's no less dangerous if it's 100 people in a room, but to see that many people taking it in and being enraptured in worship and just
The spontaneous falling.
Yeah, it's all very unpleasant.
The crowds falling. It shows, though, really, that, if you get people in a room where two or three are gathered, anything really can happen because people were ultimately buying into a phenomenon, that was self-made. They made that. Did those things happen to them? Absolutely. They bought in.
Yeah. Well, my mom had a friend who wanted to be on Benny Hinn.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and eventually learned in, I guess, trying to get on that stage somewhere that, so the friend was suffering with an ailment of sort, a disability. I don't remember exactly what was going on for this friend. But they wanted healing. They wanted healing. They wanted Benny Hinn to touch them and heal them. And it was later explained to them that no, you don't get on Benny Hinn's stage sick and he touches you and you're healed. You have the healing
In the arm.
and then you come to Benny Hinn and tell him that you're already healed. And then he performs the healing again on stage, I guess, so that people can love it and be moved by it. But no, that's not happening in that moment on stage live for people. No, that happens before you're on the camera. And so,
If it's not on camera, you RuPaul.
yeah. So when we learned that was probably the first instance of me really having some clarity that these guys, these people doing this thing are grifters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember at some point in the 90s, there was a big expose on Robert Tilton, Benny Hinn, possibly W.V. Grant on like Primetime Live or something like that. And so after that, you started hearing preachers, they kind of changed their rhetoric. And so whereas before it had been like, you don't need doctors, all you need, and they started saying, now we're not negating because there were lawsuits and things that were...
And I want to say, like, when we watched that Happy Hunters video that you showed me, they weren't necessarily saying, like, doctors don't know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
They were kind of saying, like, they're working with what they have. They may not be able to see all the things that you can see in the spirit realm. Like, they were kind of trying to say that what they were doing was complimentary, or that, and even said, like, if you have resentment towards your doctor for not catching this or not being able to heal this, or I think the one person suffered like a malpractice situation, and so they were saying, like, you need to forgive that doctor before you can be healed, which was an interesting I had never heard that before.
Well, because there still might be a reason it doesn't happen.
Yeah, you need to work on that forgiveness a little more.
Yeah.
It's an easy out. That's an easy out. Yeah.
So, I think all of that to say, the craving for the spectacular really is embedded. There's a subconscious or unconscious aversion to science that I think came with that.
Yeah.
Because it's setting people up to not need it, not think about it, not want it, and then when they're faced with it, it is somehow a conflict with their spirituality.
I want to talk about Oprah for just a second, because we watched a few months ago the John of God
Yes.
Docuseries on Netflix. If folks haven't seen it, definitely watch it. He was a faith healer in Brazil, or is is still alive. He's not practicing anymore. He's in prison. And the whole series kind of walks you through like how he became. I mean, he became huge.
He was a phenomenon too.
Huge.
Yes.
Globally huge. So people were traveling all over the world to see him and be healed by him. And the reason he's in prison is because he was also using all of this attention and all these people coming to him to abuse women.
Yeah.
But what was interesting to me about the series was two things. One, just really seeing the economics around it all.
Yes.
Because that small town that he was based in Brazil, that he was based out of and had all these people coming to. I mean, it created an entire industry.
Yes.
So people, all these people are coming there. Where are they going to stay? Hotels and
Food.
it just
Yes.
food. Like it just kind of grew this entire economy around this one thing, which is just crazy. But the other thing is Oprah had him on her show, and I was just kind of thinking about. There's kind of an anti-science thread with Oprah a bit, because even when she has people like Dr. Oz, who's not really a doctor, or Dr. Phil, who's not really a doctor, it's not, you know what I'm saying?
Well, and then she has a great relationship with T.D. Jakes.
A lot of it's all about seeking the things that aren't things
Yes.
that can just be easily explained, cut and dry, because that's not entertaining.
Well, and I was actually, as we were talking, I was going to say, I mean, years later when I was no longer in the church and was using more earth-centered, modalities, I worked with energy workers, healers, and I have definitely met my fair share of grifters in that world as well. I mean, a friend of mine got royally screwed over, spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for healers who were doing these same kinds of surgeries, spiritual surgeries, and getting worse and worse and worse while the doctors really have been a bit befuddled by her condition. But it's the same thing. There's no difference. And I always like to think that it's why Christians hate the New Age movement so much, because they're actually just...
They're offering the same thing without all of the condemnation, I guess.
Yeah. And so, I agree with you. I mean, but Oprah, that's an interesting tie-in.
Yeah. On a level, I feel like she is
she's a manifester. She's definitely one of those manifestors.
And she's selling that. She's selling, and it may not be like healing of physical whatever, but she is talking about doing a kind of work, a spiritual work that's then gonna make you successful or powerful in a way that people latch on to. And I think it's the same kind of thing. And so the fact that she would have John of God on and ultimately co-sign him for the time that she did.
I have never felt anything like I felt in that room.
Yeah. And that's all it takes. That's all you need from Oprah. And then you're, set for life. I guess we kind of touched on pastors and faith leaders having more authority on the health outcomes than doctors, than medical experts. Do you want to touch on that at all?
Well, this is why I connected it earlier to the whole Christian nationalism, Christian dominance. Because, there is a huge through line of this also being related to spiritual authority. You submit your lives to your pastor. Your pastor is your covering.
Yeah.
So if your pastor is discouraging, all of these modalities, not going to the doctor, trusting in God for your healing. Yeah, I mean, it creates this codependent relationship in the power structure. When I moved to Nashville, I experienced the craving, not myself, but I witnessed the craving for the divine.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. You do what sells, and that sells. Like saying there is some supernatural thing that's going to happen, and you are going to be healed from. It can happen. There is a way. There is a something. If you just believe enough, or if you pray enough, or if you follow these 9 steps, or if you buy this tape series, or whatever. Like that's money. That is money.
Well, and I never have seen it more ingrained than in the South. Living, I mean, in Florida, some would argue Florida is still the South. But,
Yeah.
But I saw more skepticism in the church worlds that I was in Florida, that at least among the people, even if the preachers were selling it, I would see people just, not always buying in. Here, I feel like it is just a sign on. It is just a sign on for the crazy, and for the more outrageous, the bigger the spectacle, the more they're going to participate. And I also, though, we have to connect it to our prior episodes on the worship trend.
Yes.
Because this whole notion of soaking and soak music and the atmosphere of praise is, being where God can operate. And so people really buy into the larger culture because they believe something supernatural that is going to defy science will happen for them.
And it means that all these little things, and I know we're like talking specifically about, physical things, happening for people, but just all the ways that people then need, because if worship is a lifestyle, if it's a culture, then I have to find these little mini miracles in everything that's happening to me all the time so that I can share it. And so if it's like for no reason receiving some money or something, that's some kind of miraculous manifestation of God's whatever. Just like all the little coincidences that have to then become miracles, many miracles that are, connected to this thing. And so, it's embedded just in the way of being, and it's expected. It's expected everywhere you go that things like this are happening in churches or in the Christian world.
And if they're not good ground, and that's not where you want to be.
Yeah. And this need for all of the people that are in front of us in the church, or like Christian celebrities, Christian personalities, influencers, to have some story that embodies this, that has some element of supernatural healing.
Well, I remember one of the most insightful things when I first moved here. And there was a evangelist who had cancer, a healing from cancer as part of their testimony. And I was talking with someone else who was aware of their ministry and who was also in ministry. And they said to me, well, they're going to have to come up with something else soon. You can't sell that cancer forever.
Yeah.
And so it is about this heightened need for, and it's reality TV. I mean, it is also connected to the ways we see outside of the church, the world operating. It's why all this has bled out, because the people that have become the celebrities, actually, many of them come from or are connected to this world, or were raised in this world.
Yeah.
And so this insanity of chasing the supernatural is everywhere. It is everywhere now. It has broken out. The egg has run all over the place. And, there's
the cancer, which I feel like comes up it's always cancer. It's always, you don't have to receive your cancer diagnosis. It's also diabetes a lot. It's also HIV, AIDS.
A certain gospel singer was healed of AIDS.
Allegedly. Yes. And then just disabilities in general, people getting out of wheelchairs and just miraculously being able to walk. And I feel like those are to me, like the four most common things I recall seeing or hearing over and over again, even if we never really see it or it never really sticks and we don't talk about it anymore. Like, that's what comes up over and over again.
Well, and there's also just an inherent ableism in that, because I have, precious friends who have died that did sell their healing stories when they were well and recovered, and then they ended up dying over a series of years of those things with very visible side effects, blindness, and leg amputations, and their ministry was ultimately ended because they were no longer presentable for this audience, because the audience does not want to see that. And no one talks about that as ableism. It's just, they're sick. And so sick people should be hidden away.
Well, I mean, I have on, like, in my notes, like, just all, it stems to me from the Bible. all the antiquated language that's there that it's never going to be updated. You know, you've got like mute in the Bible still. You've got crippled in the Bible still. Disability as demonic possession. I mean, yeah. Do you want to tell that story? Can you tell that story?
I can tell that story
Yeah,
because
yeah.
when I went to a Southern Baptist elementary school, when I was in the second grade, I will never forget this.
Yeah.
This is how sick this world really programs children to be. So
Yeah.
we had a girl in the school who could not hear. And I had never met anyone who could not hear. I did not know what someone who could not hear would sound like if they
Yeah.
spoke to you.
And how old were you?
I was in second grade. I was 7.
Yeah.
7. And the girl ran up to me on the playground and she said something to me. And I was terrified. I screamed because I thought she was demon possessed.
Yeah.
Because that's what I had. That was the only logical.
That was your only framework.
It was
for
my
it.
only framework. It was the only logical explanation, logical,
Right.
that I had. And I was scared of her. And if memory serves correctly, a teacher saw what happened and came up to me and I said, she's demon possessed. And she said, no, she can't hear. And I felt stupid.
Right.
But I also just had no context. I did not know. And that story, has come up for me multiple times through the years as I think about this. 'Cause I'm like, the people who come from this world are so ill prepared to be in the world with people who aren't like them.
Right.
And so the fact that in second grade at 7 years old, I had never encountered anyone who could not hear.
Yeah.
To even know that, no one had ever talked to me other than the Bible stories.
And I was gonna say, like, when the Bible literally says that those people, people with any kind of disability, and Jesus touched them, and the demon left them, and then they were able to hear, or they were able to walk, or then it's like, yeah, that would be your absolute understanding of that. That's what you would come away from that with.
Well, and then I also have to connect that to someone like an Ernest Angley, who I would see probably not too long after that on television, praying for people who could not hear and calling it a deaf and dumb spirit.
Right.
And so that just reinforces what I immediately thought was happening in the first place. And, you've got people on television essentially telling the world that people who cannot see or hear or talk are demon possessed.
Yeah.
Bound by a spirit.
Yeah. And when the curing that or healing that is the end game, that is salvation.
Yes.
If they are to be saved, if they are to be Christians in this world, then it's contingent on curing them or healing them. And that's so much pressure. And so, yeah, that's absolutely sick, and that's absolutely ableism. Because then is the sickness and the disease punishment, which we also do see in the Bible. We see that, with plagues and with, whatever is when Christians do get sick, when they're diagnosed with something, did they do something wrong to deserve that?
Speaking of, another way in which this is irrational. And I mean, I remember being told that if I took communion and had sinned or had unforgiveness in my heart, I would get sick.
I've heard that too.
And so it's another, it's irrational that because I drink some grape juice and eat a cracker,
dry wafer,
that I'm going to get sick if I haven't forgiven someone. I mean, it is insanity. It is insanity.
Yep. Yeah.
But things are that spooky.
Yeah.
We're that spooky.
And, just of course, blind and deaf are used a lot by Jesus as synonyms for wicked or lost or sinful.
He who has an ear to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Reprobate. People who need to be saved are the ones that are blind or are the ones that are deaf. And so how does that inform how Christians then are walking around in the world and interacting with people?
Mad at people that can't see.
With different abilities.
Yes.
Or, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's again, not going to change if these people are going to continue to read their King James Version and cleave to that. Especially, if they're not even going to maybe grab one of the newer interpretations of the Bible that's at least trying to clean up that language and contextualize and update things with how we would maybe frame some of those scriptures, yeah, that it's just going to continue, especially in those spaces. So you talked a little bit about the whole spiritual healing, energy healing. You know, we get more of that in the new age spaces, you know, energy medicine. And with all, I mean, just with this whole conversation, this is not, I do, you know, I have such a level of skepticism around all of it. But I also recognize, you know, that
it's real.
These are people's identities. Yeah. These are people's livelihoods. People make careers out of these things. People truly come away from experiences practicing these things, wholeheartedly believing in them. And so this is, you know, not me saying you're a fucking idiot, but...
Well, and I mean, I have said, I mean, I think I've said it already in this. I mean, I have utilized energy workers.
Yeah, Reiki people. And
absolutely. And I have had incredible experiences, but not because they did something for me. It was, for me, those experiences, many of them have been helpful because I have done enough emotional and spiritual work on my own to know that sometimes I just cannot see a particular situation because I'm the one that's in it. And so if I can meet someone who has the ability to also work in energetic fields, I can meet them there. And between the two of us, between what I'm bringing with my own awareness and their insight from the outside, I might be able to see a situation differently. I am never going to those people to heal my body. Years ago, I did have one experience with a barnacle that someone worked with me with, and it was powerful, and the barnacle did indeed go away. But that was also something that had, you know, shown up in my body from some emotional
piece. I was going to say, like, I think we just as a society, so underestimate the role of stress on the body and how that manifests in so many ways that are not good for us. Being in a pandemic you know, entering our third year of a pandemic is kind of, you know, bringing some things to light around what that kind of stress on people, that prolonged stress does. But I mean, come on, there are all kinds of studies about what poverty does to people's bodies. And so I think it, you know, can kind of explain why the kinds of people that hinge on the spirit healers and all of that are people who need something supernatural because maybe they don't have health care, or maybe they, you know, are just living in conditions that no one should have to live in.
Well, and I do have to say, just in connection to what my experience with the barnacle was not why I went. It was something that happened as we were, you know, as I was leaving. She felt it through my shirt, and she said, "What is that?" And I explained what it was, and she just said, "It'll be gone before you come to your next appointment." And I'd had it for 5 years, and it was. She called me to make my next appointment, and I remember skeptically saying, "I still got that thing on my back too," and went in the bathroom to change my shirt, and when I lifted my arm, without being graphic, it broke. And I went to that next appointment and told her that, and it was, you know, it was powerful. But again, I did not go to her for that. We were doing emotional and spiritual work. And so I think there's also just a rationality that people have to have when they're going into these situations of not expecting someone else to do something for you, to make something else happen for you. That's where it all becomes dangerous. And so,
on the flip side, though, I know we plan to have a whole conversation around positivity culture, but on the flip side, you know, someone else doing something for you, but also this notion of faith confessions.
Hate it. Faith-based denial.
Yeah. Using that to say things that are not.
Lying.
And probably won't be. Not going to say things that are not as though they were. No, things that are not and are delusional. Yeah.
All I've really found I've never been a faith confessor. That's never been my thing. Mm-hmm. But in having relationships with people who are, is that the very thing they spend a lot of time denying becomes the thing that explodes the hardest eventually. And so, it's a lot easier to start accepting things as they are and maybe working your way out from there versus just putting on blinders and saying, it's not this, it's this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find the whole environment, but it is also why these people, Paula White, can get up, and say Trump he's going to win the election. But that's what they are doing. They are exercising. These people are working in the political arena. These people believe these things. Sarah Palin, went to this is all part of the record. I mean, she goes to this kind of dominionist, declarative ministry. And these are the people who have taken over the government. And so when we see, policies being put in place, it is directly related to all of this. Why we are not being taken care of in this pandemic is because of these people.
Yeah, the faith confession of we're just going to live with going to live with the virus.
I'm done with COVID. I'm done with COVID.
I'm done with it. It's over.
And then the majority of these people just say it was never real to start with.
Yeah.
And so, we can't.
No, the faith confessions, it's the same rhetoric when applied to that as it is applied to this.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So I think we've both experienced, and you kind of alluded to this, like what happens when the thing you say you were delivered from actually isn't delivered.
Yeah.
Or, just period. I think we've both experienced Christians just from the get-go hiding or ignoring that they have an illness.
Yes.
And I was, just trying to pinpoint, like, what is that? Like, what is that? We see all the time. I see this way more commonly when Christians pass away. We never learn why.
Yep, they never say.
Never say why. They never say why. And, and so I'm just, like, connecting all of that and going, like, okay, so how much of it is embarrassment around what kind of disease it is? And how much of it is just embarrassment around being sick at all?
Well, I think a huge part of it, because I've had a lot of time and a lot of friends who have died, to think about this. I mean, I've had one friend in particular who was actually would get regularly thrown out of hospitals when he had to be admitted because he was such a belligerent patient, but had been healed. He had been healed and had recurring problems and had to keep going back. And I found out later that he, for years, had a mass that he refused to let them look at. And as I've thought about that, because his death was really, just devastating for me. And I've really thought about what that was. And it is the belief that if you don't know about it, it can't kill you.
Right.
And that's what it's Christian. It's mind over matter.
Well, it's the life and death over the power of the tongue. Like, it's all that stuff conflated. And so I'd rather not say. I'd rather it remain unspoken.
Yep.
And then I'm just having life.
Yep.
And if I faith confess the life, then I have the life. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And we've seen it just over and over and over again in people's lives that we know. Yeah. I mean, even
Aretha Franklin. Like, even watching her whole situation, the way she talked about being sick or didn't talk about being sick,
disagreeing with the doctor
when she gave interviews or when she gave testimony in performance.
As I was leaving the hospital, the doctor said, "Miss Franklin, there's something that we want to tell you." Yeah. And I didn't quite agree with what he had to say. No. You see, you don't know nothing about me other than I sing and my name is Frank. Yeah. You don't know that I come from a praying family. Yes, I do. I said that I know you doctors are brilliant. You haven't studied and been up by the midnight oil, studying to know what you know and do what you do. Oh yeah, but I want you to know that I've turned it over. Oh yeah, I've turned it over. I've turned it over to a higher authority. Yes, I have. A little higher than you.
That's all behind me. I'm moving on. Yeah, I mean, and I understand people have a right to privacy.
Yeah.
But I also...
And to be, again, like, we're saying, hate positivity culture. I get wanting to be optimistic, especially if something is in regression. Like, there is something to that with being a survivor of cancer or whatever, where, it is just about being optimistic and, whatever. But at the same time, no, you do have to recognize that if you've received a diagnosis, you have that diagnosis. And treating things properly, taking recommendations wholly, is the pathway to any kind of resolution, Well,
I mean, I knew someone once who had a form of cancer, and just trying to ask questions and just saying, what stage are you in? And the refusal of even taking that information in from the doctors, just not even being able to absorb it for themselves. Just, nope, didn't know what? Didn't tell me.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And we've seen it over and over and over again.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, how much of this, is it embarrassment? Is it embarrassing? Because, you said, like, I get people have a right to privacy. I get people. But at the same time, what does it hurt? What does it hurt to name things as they are? What does it hurt to live in reality and not jar people or create scenario where it's that much harder for people to help down the line when things are really critical, or when you're in the ICU, or when you are on your deathbed, or when you can't pay your bills when things have just,
Spiraled.
built up and, just, yeah.
Well, I also wonder how much of it is about self-harm. And I don't mean in the sense of blaming people for their illness, but I mean in the sense of being unable to receive care and compassion from people. I remember one friend lost his vision, and I now realize they were lying about why they had lost their vision. That it was related to diabetes,
yeah.
But had said for months it was related to cataracts, and they were going to have a corrective surgery. They allegedly had this corrective surgery, and then it was worse. And it was because ultimately the diagnosis that he had originally received didn't take the diabetes into account. And so, you let time go by and you say, how are you doing? How's your And it was this when it changes, I'll tell you. And I realized that talking about it burst their bubble.
Yeah.
It shined a light on the story that was not real, that had been created around it. And they also then had to beat themselves up by not being able to receive care or concern from people. And so I could not be present for them in that way, because they knew it wasn't about me having judgment. I just wanted to show compassion and be concerned and help.
Yeah.
In the emotional ways that friends help. And, just seeing how many people in this world die alone, I had one friend, never forget this, HIV positive, had pneumonia. This was in the 90s. Somebody I talked to every day. And then one day I don't hear from them. 2 days I don't hear from them. 3 days I don't hear from them. 4 days I don't hear from them. And I start looking for them. They were in the hospital. And I found him in the hospital. And they were livid and did not speak to me for months, because and the only thing they said to me on the phone was, "Don't you come see me." It's because they were in the AIDS ward.
Yeah.
And they didn't want
They
me.
were ashamed.
They were ashamed. And so I think about like all of the ways people don't believe they are deserving of compassion
Yeah.
and care. So I think that's a huge part of it. And I don't know if that's embarrassment. I feel like it's a little different than embarrassment.
It is a little different. It's shame. It is shame, though. I think it's, stems from the same, kind of thing psychologically. I think we do see this a lot, especially with, as gay men, knowing that HIV/AIDS is no longer a death sentence, but
Right.
also seeing over and over again, even today. I mean, I went to high school with someone who died maybe 5 years ago of AIDS.
Yep.
And I just I do not understand what that was. Like, was he just not taking the meds? And we see this especially in
the
Christian
church,
spaces, in the
absolutely.
church. And it's like, what is that? Because there should not be a reason for why that is. Did you just ignore that you were sick for so long that at a certain point it was too late? Did you not, follow up on the treatment and do the things that they told you to do? Were you not taking the pills? Were you not doing what is that? And I do think so much of it is about the conditioning of the church, the psychological conditioning of the church.
Well, and I want to connect it, I think, also to mental health.
Yeah.
Because we've seen an uptick in suicides in the church in particular. And, this whole idea that depression is a spirit. The whole idea that, if you are sad, it's because you are not in the joy of the Lord.
Yeah.
And it's clearly something else you need to be doing to make yourself feel better. And so it's also connected to that.
Yeah.
I mean, is such a secondary epidemic. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing you said bubble burst earlier, and I think that's just such a thing, because I do think illnesses, period, diagnoses, period, are potentially bubble bursting
Totally.
things for Christians in the same way, like as we talked about in our episode about conversion therapy and, how you believe you're on one track, or how I believed in particular, I was on this particular track as a Christian, and then realizing, I might be homosexual. That's bubble bursting. I now have to redefine my faith. Am I loved? Does God love me? Like all that stuff. If you are taking in the Bible in the ways that we talked about, disability is a demonic possession, or it's some kind of punishment, or it's something. Yeah, am I worthy? Does God love me? What am I doing wrong that's keeping me from being healed? All of that stuff compounding, on and either it's going to redefine your faith, and I think with 900,000 people dead of COVID. A lot of people with long COVID now walking around with it, probably ignoring the fact that they have it or not acknowledging that that's what they're dealing with. I think we're dealing with a lot of bubble burstings
Totally.
in a lot of worlds right now that I don't know that we're fully going to know the full depth of for another few years. But I just think about the Christians who have watched their family members die in a matter of weeks to this thing. What does that then mean?
Yep. Well, my observation, because I've seen, my timeline is typically just full of, at least every day, I see at least 3.
Yeah.
3 COVID deaths, not necessarily that are directly related to me, but people I know, knowing people who die. Mm-hmm. And what I really observe, and I don't know if this is how it gets actually acted out in their interior, but I just see people really dismissively moving on.
Yeah.
From those deaths. God took them home. And I just have to, accept what God allows. Mm-hmm. And so I don't see a lot of contemplation or introspection about it. It is very much just like a rapid acceptance of people dying and not really questioning what's underneath it. I do want to connect it. When I was sick in 2012 and I was in bed for 5 months, I observed 2 things from my friends of faith. And one was either the inability to allow me to talk about what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
And it was well, I'm going to pray for your healing. And
Right.
I remember saying to multiple people, no, don't pray for me to be healed because I am where I am right now. This is what is happening to me. And I am going to see it through. So I don't need you to pray for it to go away. I'm in a process. And I have to experience this. Because there was nothing anybody other than some magic that was going to make it go away. And the other thing was either they just stopped calling.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing that I saw happen to my friends. It was the inability to be present in illness because it made them uncomfortable.
Yeah. Can't just throw the rhetoric at it.
And discussing it was perceived as complaining.
Oh, yeah.
And I never complained. Like, I never complained. I'm like Albertina Walker. I'm not complaining. I'm discussing it. And people were just be grateful you're alive. I'm grateful I'm alive. I'm also grateful I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing right now. I really am. I didn't resent it for 1 minute, but they could not be in that with me. They could not. And so I don't know how these people who are claiming to be the light of the world are showing up for people.
Yeah.
Because if you can't be present in illness and you can't contemplate illness and you can't, I wrote a song about it and it was like so ostracized in a sense because people were, I remember one artist wrote me and said, is everything okay? And it's just a song about contemplating death.
Yeah.
Because when you're at the banks of the river, that's what you have to think about. That's what you're looking at. And we should not be afraid to think about that.
The whole human experience. Yeah, when there's that many roadblocks, when there are that many just like things that have to be completely shut down, you're not getting the fullness of it.
Yeah.
And how can you meet and address it? And it goes back to like the whole, like we were talking about in another previous episode, like the whole marketplace of ideas thing.
Yes.
Like, well, there are a lot of other philosophies or worldviews that do encompass this a little bit better, and so that might be explaining why you're not filling asses in the seats in the churches like you used to. That might be explaining why people are leaving, in droves.
And I mean, and
or deconstructing or whatever people are doing now.
It really changed my relationship with older people. I mean, who I've always had close relationships with older people, but it changed my ability to be there like in their last years because I could understand a little bit of what they are facing as they know death is kind of imminent. And so to be present with them and to be able to listen to them without needing to do what people did to me, which was shushing me, was allowing them to talk about what they were facing. Just as like, I could die tonight. I'm 80 something.
Yeah.
And just to be able to have space to hear that and not feel fear myself because I'm uncomfortable with death, it completely shifted that for me. And so I think, the inability to contemplate illness, the inability to contemplate climate change, that the world may not always be here in the way that we know it.
I did want to just like quickly touch on, because we spent a lot of time talking about, what this looks like on a personal level or just like a one-on-one relationship or even community level. But this does then have, when you are taking that, as you said, that Christian nationalist kind of
dominionist,
that perspective and making that national or global, then you've got huge swaths of evangelicals who are climate change deniers. Because, why should I care? First off, why should I care?
Because the trumpet's blowing and I'm going to get to leave.
I talked a little bit about stem cell research and that just being so like the controversial topic when I was growing up. But I feel like there is such a thread of fear of advanced technology in the church. And I think that's historic because if you look back far enough, you've got huge swaths of Christians afraid of books when books became a thing. Or the radio, television. I know cable television. It's why we didn't have cable television when I was growing up in the house, even though every other house did, because cable television was evil. Cable television was wicked. There's too much wickedness that can come in if you've got cable. You know, and I know that was the case when it was just regular TV too. You know, it just always shifts, and therefore the church is always a little bit behind. They talk about our devices, our
Totally.
smartphones, and things in the same way as they then perpetuate
Using the dark web.
I was gonna say, yet using the Facebook and all these places to spread misinformation, but okay. And you see it in the fear of scientific advancements,
Yes.
specifically like cloning and all the things that they think are playing God, and wanting to not fund or wanting to make sure aren't being taught about in schools, or wanting to make sure aren't shared at all, or aren't legitimized in
Yes.
any space. And then of course, we see it with the anti-vax shit. We see it with the COVID-19 pandemic in particular, and you know, who's the number one demographic of folks who are most resistant to even getting those first shots.
Yep.
They don't even want to wear masks.
Nope.
They don't want to believe that it's a real disease.
Yep. Taking away God's wonderful breathing machine.
They want to throw God's wonderful breathing system out the door. You're all turning your backs on it.
What the fuck? What the fuck? So, all right, that's all I've got. You got anything else?
I don't. I mean, I know that our next episode will be kind of continuing this, because we will be talking exclusively about the rapture, which is also anti-science, in case you never thought about it.
Sure.
No, it is. It is.
So what would the outlaw version of a relationship between science and faith look like to you?
When people come up for prayer for cancer, we route them to a doctor if they have not already been. We, churches help people find medical treatment and care for their maladies.
I'd like to see community funds that go to churches, the taxes exemption and all of that, working to fight things like environmental racism. Working to fund research around diseases or just conditions that affect marginalized communities more. We would absolutely have seen a very different reality when the AIDS epidemic hit.
That's right.
It would not have taken so long for a president to utter the phrase. And same with COVID. I mean, just the response would be so different. Churches would be testing grounds. They would be, and I know some of them have been. So, shout out to those who have stepped up and been those spaces. But there would also not be a huge need to get back to doing church in that way when it's not safe to do it.
Yeah.
And I would love for there to just be, because I don't know how you can have healthy, real, effective community if people don't know what's going on with people.
Yeah.
And so if people are sick, there would be no shame around that sickness. There would be no question to just share that. And when you have a need, saying you have a need, or people stepping up to fill that need, and it not becoming this snowballing catastrophic thing where, oh, they died, I didn't even know they were sick. You know what I'm saying? All that stuff. I mean, goodness, the ableism.
I was going to say, I think we in an outlaw version, we would see many more differently abled people on their platforms.
Yes.
To normalize the fact that people are not all alike.
But disability treated with respect.
And
not something that's shunned, not something that's seen as lesser, or lesser, meaning that the person who is disabled or living with a disability is a lesser Christian, or has lesser faith, or is lesser loved.
And not needing them to be up there to give you all the gory details of their story.
Just letting not up there for spectacle, not up there for you to see them be spontaneously healed by the Benny Hand whoosh.
Yeah.
That isn't real.
Yep. That's what it would be.
All right. Where can people find you?
You can find me on the Twitter and Instagram at Tim Dillinger. You can find me on Substack, godsmusicIsmylife.substack.com. You can find me on Facebook at Tim Dillinger Music.
And you can find me, Ray, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Ray Curenton. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Until
you.
next time.
Bye.